Hello, everyone. Oh, wow, that was loud. So, thanks for coming here today after the lunch. I know it's tough, but thanks for coming. And I'm honored to introduce one very special lady. Her name is Rebecca Klein, and she's the founder of Cheetah Conservation Botswana. And to be honest, her story is striking, and it resonates with me a lot because as a child, she was raised in a family with a mom who instilled love for wildlife in her since a very early age. So this passion for wildlife was in her since her childhood. And then soon after, she moved to Botswana, and that's where the story gets a little bit crazy because there she encountered two cheetahs whose parent was killed, two brother cheetahs. And she felt that she really wanted to help those animals, but she couldn't because, as it turned out, in Botswana at that point, no one really did anything to protect cheetahs. And she decided to change that, and so just like that, she created an organization, Cheetah Conservation Botswana. I mean, not many people can do that like that, right? And here we have her today, and I gotta say that she is a great inspiration for me and for many other people. So please welcome on stage Rebecca Klein.
Thank you, Olya. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And yeah, thank you so much to all of you for coming here to hear more about what we're doing to conserve cheetahs in the beautiful wilderness of Botswana. So as you can probably tell, I'm originally from England. My parents are both English, and I was born there, but we left when I was only 2 years old. And my parents thought it would be a wonderful idea to raise me in some different countries all over the world, and particularly in some really remote countries like Somalia and Papua New Guinea. So I grew up sort of in the bush, as we say, far from towns and civilization, and with sort of more animals as friends than people. I sort of had pet chameleons and a baby antelope we raised, and my neighbors had a baby serval cat that I helped to care for. So all of these interactions with these beautiful wildlife species really sort of early on kind of made me love wildlife and wild places. As Olya says, my mother was a huge influence, bringing me up with fabulous environmental values to care for different cultures, for beautiful habitats and wild animals. And I think what really sort of brought it home to me was when I would go back to my native England to visit all of the aunties and uncles and family over there. We would go back once a year. And I would see the difference between a really wild place that I was lucky enough to live in and a very developed place. We would go for walks in the forest, and it would be so beautiful, and I would love it. But we'd get to the end, and there would be a road, or there would be a town. And I realized, that I loved wilderness, that I really wanted to dedicate my life to conserving wild places, and the threatened species that call them home. So I got a degree in wildlife biology. I did a few projects in different countries, Thailand and Malaysia, but I had lived in Africa before, and so I was really drawn back there. And the name Botswana had always called me. I always thought Botswana's one of the last wildernesses as well. I want to go to that place. And so I got an opportunity to go and work in a reserve in southern Botswana, and I, as Olya said, met those two beautiful cheetah brothers who basically inspired me to start the Cheetah Project, Cheetah Conservation Botswana. And we're lucky enough to work in this wonderful land. Botswana, I'm sure you know, is a country in southern Africa, right in the center. It's about the size of France or Texas. The country does have some wonderful conservation credentials. We have 21% of our land is actually protected areas, as you can see from the Central Kalahari Game Reserve and these other parks. And we specifically work in the Western Kalahari. And this is where we find the most cheetahs in Botswana. And this is actually our research camp here in the Western Kalahari. And we're based outside of protected areas because that's where you find most of the cheetahs. About 76% of Africa's cheetahs are actually found outside protected areas. They're very wide-ranging, low-density animals that need large areas to roam. So we cannot rely on protected areas alone. So we work on the farmland regions of Botswana in this beautiful Kalahari region. The Kalahari is this incredibly expansive area in Botswana. It's not actually a desert, it's a semi-arid savanna, savanna lands and also bushlands as well. And we have some of the most important populations of some of Africa's most threatened carnivores. We have one of the highest populations of cheetahs left in the world, leopards, wild dogs, and also lions. And the Western Kalahari is an important strategic area. It's a corridor region between the two protected areas that I showed you on the map and also through into Namibia. So a very important area to be conserved. And we can really see how important Botswana is in terms of the range of cheetahs. In fact, the sort of greenish yellow is the cheetahs range in 1900. They ranged all throughout southern Africa, up into North Africa, Arabian Peninsula, down even into India and Central Asia. And we estimate there was about 100,000 cheetahs at that time. And due to loss of habitat, declining prey populations, increasing human-wildlife conflict, the cheetahs have declined, their ranges retracted significantly. In 2007, we estimated there was about 10,000 cheetahs left in the world. So that was a 90% decline in just 100 years. And it's a shame to report also that just last year we finished the more recent range-wide assessment, and now the global population of cheetahs is 7,100. So they are still declining. But one thing I am happy to report is the cheetah population in Botswana has remained stable. So through the adequate habitat, the low human population, a government that's very committed to conserving its wildlife resource, and hopefully some of the activities of Cheetah Conservation Botswana and other fabulous NGOs, we're working hard to conserve them, and we've managed to maintain the population at 2,000 cheetahs. So we have 30% of the world's cheetahs left today. So, and being in the middle of the southern African range of cheetahs, it really is strategic that we make sure that Botswana's cheetah population is conserved. And of course, it's not just about cheetahs. Cheetahs are an ideal flagship species for the Kalahari ecosystem. If we can conserve cheetahs as a high-level carnivore, we know that the other animals on which they're dependent and the habitat which they're dependent is conserved as well. They're a fantastic indicator species. And they're very charismatic, beautiful animals. The fastest land animal on Earth. They really have the power to inspire and engender pride, in people around the world and also people in Botswana. So being this charismatic animal, they make a fabulous flagship for our organization and for the Kalahari itself. And they need large areas to survive. As I mentioned, we cannot rely on protected areas to conserve adequate numbers of cheetahs. They exist in low densities in these areas. They do live in low densities to avoid sort of stronger carnivores such as lions and hyenas. And so they need conservation over large landscapes, not just reliant on the protected areas, but looking outside where we find the most cheetahs. And in Botswana, most of the people in Botswana of which the cheetahs coexist are livestock farming communities. So the biggest threat to cheetahs today is actually human-carnivore conflict. Cheetahs will coexist, will live and share the land with farming communities, and they will occasionally take unprotected livestock. And due to livestock losses, farming communities will do retaliatory killings because they don't want, obviously, their livelihoods to be in threat. So, the fastest land animal on Earth will often be seen as nothing more than a threat to their livestock and their livelihoods. And this is causing sort of one of the reasons why we see so many declines in the cheetah populations today, and is the biggest threat to cheetahs in Botswana. In the 1960s, the EU supported Botswana to increase their beef industry, and so they went through and they sunk deep boreholes throughout the Kalahari so that we have permanent livestock farming settlements there now. So the conflict has increased significantly over the last 50 years. So that's one of the key things that Cheetah Conservation Botswana needs to do. We need to make sure that we reduce these threats and that we promote coexistence and we support communities to live together with cheetahs and other carnivores. So we've set up a multidisciplinary conservation program incorporating scientific research, community outreach for the farming communities, and education for the youth as well. Our scientific research program is really focused, as I mentioned, outside the protected areas to better understand the movements, the behaviors, the ecology, the needs, the conservation requirements of cheetahs outside of protected areas. What do we need to conserve them? And what kinds of information can we give back to the communities that live together with them to make sure that they can better understand who they're living with? And of course, where we work, it can be quite bushy environments. The cheetahs are under conflict with people, so they're not very easy to see. So we have to use a lot of remote methods to survey them. We need to understand how many there are in different areas, where they are, what kind of home ranges they're having, and that will also enable us to monitor their trends over time and also be able to focus in which areas are really strategic for their conservation. So in the Kalahari, we have these fantastic roads, which everything that crosses the sandy roads will leave their tracks and impressions. So we use spoor tracking to count cheetahs and find out where cheetahs are. And we use the skills of these fabulous Kalahari San people, the Bushmen, who are able to sort of understand so much about the environment by reading these signs on the ground. We also use camera traps, remotely triggered cameras. So when the animal passes by, it takes a photo. We put camera traps on water holes, on roads, but particularly on these marking trees. Marking trees are a very important part of cheetah ecology. It's like an information board or sort of a bar where all the cheetahs in the area will visit from time to time. And they leave their scats there and they'll mark them. And all the cheetahs can learn who's in the area and what they're up to by visiting these marking trees. This is one of the cameras that we had up at the marking tree, so you can see how cheetahs do actually climb. And they'll climb these low branches to get up and leave their mark. And this is a very important tool as well, because we're able to show to farmers that if they remove cheetahs, they're just opening up a vacant territory for another one to move in. It can actually increase the numbers of cheetahs on their land. If they leave the territorial animals that they have at these marking trees, then they have just one or two cheetahs in the area, and their conflict can be reduced because they will keep the other cheetahs in the area out of that territory. So better the devil you know, and understanding the animals that you're living with. And it gives us a lot of other information as well about other wildlife in the area, other carnivores, interactions, prey species, etc. So we can really get a good idea of the biodiversity in these areas and the behaviors and interactions between other carnivores as well. Up the marking trees, the cheetahs leave their scat. We collect the scat, and we analyze the scat, and we find out what the cheetahs are eating. A lot of farmers will think this cheetah's just living on my land, eating my wildlife, eating my livestock. And we were able to show that actually 6% of cheetah's diet are actually made up of livestock. They may be living in areas that have a lot of livestock, much more livestock than wildlife in the area, but they're still selecting for the wildlife. So protect your animals, protect your livestock. The cheetahs will eat wild prey. We also use the services of scat detection dogs. We've actually sort of pioneered the use of training a local dog to detect cheetah scat, much how sort of detection dogs work in airports, etc. And this is our scat detection dog, Lueto, who's just found a cheetah scat in the environment, who's getting his reward. And satellite collars as well. We need to understand the cheetah's spatial needs. What kind of areas are they utilizing, how large are their home ranges, etc. So we will collar cheetahs in different areas to find out the size of the areas they're utilizing. And, we found out really interesting things. I mean, an average cheetah home range can be at about 800 square miles. They're roaming over large areas. And they can travel up to sort of 5 miles a day. So we give that information back to the farmers. They're not just sitting on your farm eating your livestock. They're moving over large areas. Don't leave your livestock vulnerable, and the cheetahs will move on. So all of this information from the scientific research goes back into our community outreach programs, and this is really key to what we do. We need to raise the awareness of and the knowledge of people in these areas, in the Kalahari, so they know more about cheetahs and other carnivores, and they're better able to coexist. And we knew this because there's a lot of ways that you can coexist with cheetahs. If you utilize the most appropriate forms of farming, then you can coexist by using effective livestock enclosures, using livestock guarding dogs, breeding seasons, donkeys. All of these techniques are proven to reduce conflict between people and cheetahs and other carnivores. So we promote all of this information to our communities. We do this through support visits. People can call us if they have a problem. We'll go there, we'll talk to them about what problems they're having, and we'll give them advice as to what kind of methods they can implement to reduce their losses. We have farmers' workshops. We can be called to a settlement, to a village, and we'll go there, we'll sit down with everybody, and we'll give them that information and talk to them about their challenges and issues and help them to solve them. And then we'll also invite farmers back to our training center. At our site in the Western Kalahari, we're on a sustainably run cattle farm. The farm manager there uses all of these sustainable livestock management practices. He's wildlife friendly, he doesn't kill carnivores. We're able to demonstrate all these things. So they can learn directly from the farmers themselves who are doing it on the farm that we're on. And we also have a small stock goats and sheep demonstration farm where we show people how to train livestock guarding dogs. Here's one of our dogs, Ghost. She's very good because she can sort of hide amongst the goats and you don't see her. And we bring puppies, unwanted puppies, puppies from either villages and no one wants them, or animal shelters, and we bring the puppies here, and Ghost and our other livestock guarding dogs train the puppies how to look after the goats and sheep. They go in at 8 weeks, they bond with the livestock, they go out with them into the bush, and they aggressively protect them from harm. We've placed about 75 livestock guarding dogs, and we've found that farmers who've been experiencing conflict and have livestock guarding dogs have a reduction in 86% of their livestock losses. So a very effective tool. This is one of our livestock guarding dog recipients, Naomi Tarumba. She had a small livestock herd. She's a single mother. She's got 3 children. She was really, really struggling because she kept having losses from jackals and cheetahs of her livestock herd. It wasn't growing, and she had very little livelihood. We placed 2 livestock guarding dogs with her, and over the last 2 years, she's been able to increase the size of her goat herd and sell off the excess number. And through the money she's made, she's been able to buy a house, she's been able to get electricity, buy all the vaccinations for her livestock, etc., and spend more time with her children. So it really does help people to improve their livelihood. And here's her fabulous dog, all grown up and well cared for. And this is, so dogs saving cats. That's a really exciting kind of mantra that we have. And this is Piri. She's actually one of our livestock guarding dogs. This year she passed away at 9 years old, but she trained about 55 livestock guarding dog puppies in how to protect the goats and sheep. And we estimate that one livestock guarding dog can protect about 30 cheetahs. It will stop potential of about 30 cheetahs coming through and causing depredation events to farmers. So really a fabulous, effective tool. Of course, their care is very important to us. We make sure we monitor them monthly to make sure that they're being well cared for. We provide free vaccinations, free sterilizations once a year to all of our Livestock Guarding Dog Network members to make sure the dogs are in great condition. And all of these livestock guarding dog folks, people that have been to our farmers' workshops, they can join our farmers' network. And this is an opportunity to farmers who are utilizing great methods to be able to share that information with each other. So rather than us going out and saying this is a great way to do things, now the farmers themselves are sharing that information with each other. And we organize exchange visits so they can go and visit each other's farms and see how they're coexisting effectively with wildlife. And a new program we've started this year is with the Kalahari San. Amazing people. They're not livestock farmers, as in many of the people in Botswana are. These guys were hunter-gatherers, and in 2014, Botswana banned hunting, so they have no livelihoods now. We've got 2 communities that we're working with in this corridor region between the Central Kalahari Game Reserve and the Kalahari Transfrontier Park. This is a really strategic movement corridor, and these 2 settlements, Bere and Kakai, we're working together with them to map their natural resources, see what kinds of livelihood opportunities they would like to see for themselves, and then working together with other NGOs to help facilitate that so that their livelihoods can be improved. And we want to create a tourism route so that people can drive between these 2 protected areas, and the communities along the way can set up community campsites, craft productions, places to eat, etc. So they can actually start to benefit from living together with some of these wildlife species. So I now want to hand over to a fabulous friend of mine. Oh, these are the participatory planning meetings we have with communities. Very colorful and beautiful. So, yes, I now want to hand over to a great friend and colleague of mine. She joined Cheetah Conservation Botswana in 2009. Previously worked with Australia Zoo. And much like me, I always say that I didn't necessarily choose cheetahs, but they chose me. The same happened for Jane. Whilst working at Australia Zoo, she was promoted to the cheetah keeper, fell in love with cheetahs, and got inspired to come over and volunteer with us. And we thought she was so fantastic that we offered her a position. So please welcome Jane Horgan.
Yeah, it's been a dream come true, and they just keep renewing my contract. That's fantastic. Thanks so much for having me, everybody. It's lovely to see your happy faces. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our education programs, which are a great inspiration at CCB. So, in terms of wildlife, Botswana is just the jewel of the continent. I mean, we have some of the largest populations of not only cheetah, but lion, African wild dog, brown hyenas, obviously elephants as well. So, the richness in the diversity of wildlife in Botswana is absolutely incredible. So it's really surprising that environmental education doesn't make up a formal part of the curriculum in Botswana's schools. And that's really sad that they're not promoting the sustainable use and the conservation of Botswana's rich natural resources. So we make it a big part of our work to go into the schools and to create this environmental education so that the next generation of conservationists, or the young generation of conservationists, can know all about conservation and already start making their impact in the conservation of Botswana's wildlife. So we go into the schools themselves and we pass on our core messages about cheetahs, about the threat of human-wildlife conflict, and how even kids can make a difference in trying to protect the cheetahs of Botswana. Sometimes we go to schools in the towns. Sometimes we go to the schools in the rural villages. The classrooms look a little bit different in those rural areas, but the kids absolutely love the messages that we bring to them. We also conduct after-school programs, which are similar to the school visits, but involve a much more holistic and more involved curriculum. So we're not just talking about cheetahs and human-wildlife conflict, but a lot of the other large carnivores and the other conservation issues that we have in Botswana. So the kids get a really good sense of the overall importance of looking after the environment. We use games and fun activities with the kids to help reinforce our core messages and help them to remember it. And you can see that they absolutely love the games and the curriculum that we provide for them. For me, the highlight of the after-school program is the fact that we take the kids into the wildlife areas. So thanks to a very generous donation from Lataka Safaris in Botswana, we were able to take over 100 children into Marami Game Reserve, one of the best wildlife places on the planet, and they got to experience the wildlife experience. And it's crazy because a lot of these kids have grown up and they live on the edge of the Okavango Delta. So one of the most beautiful wildlife places in the entire world. World Heritage Site, beautiful protected area. And yet they've never seen a lion. They've never seen an elephant. And it blows my mind. So this is Hofeone. She's 9 years old. And this is the exact moment when she saw an elephant for the first time. And this photo, and that moment, it's just, this makes me go on when I have those tough days, you know? This was just so special. I mean, all she knew of elephants before this point was her uncle who had crops, and the elephants would occasionally come in and steal and damage his crops. So all she knew about elephants up until this point was negative things. And then she had this experience. So this creates a positive association between wildlife and the kids that has the ability to completely change their lives. I mean, it's experiences like this that could turn them into the next Shivani or the next, Klein or the next conservationist, that changes the world. So for me, this is a really special part of what we do. We also conduct environmental bush camps. We have a fantastic facility in the Kalahari where the kids can come and spend 4 days with us in the bush. And that's a really great way for them to learn all about the animals and the environment in which, the Kalahari involves. And again, we use fun activities to help reinforce the messages, which the kids really dig. We get them really dirty in that good Kalahari dirt as well, which they love. But by far the highlight of the camp for the kids is the pool. Not only because it's 110 degrees outside, but a lot of these kids have never actually been in a pool. So we have to make sure, especially with the younger kids, that we don't fill the pool the whole way because they need to be able to touch the bottom when they go in. But the kids absolutely love it. So do our staff. This is our education intern, Seho. And I can't begrudge her going in the pool when it's that hot. Sometimes we need this to cool off. But as well as the student education that we do, we also do education for the general public. So we use information stalls at important cultural events and important agricultural shows around the country in order to open up dialogue between ourselves and the farming communities that are dealing with cheetahs on a day-to-day basis. So that's a really great way for us to learn what the problems are on the ground and help spread our message a little bit further. So Rebecca mentioned that the majority of cheetahs occur outside of protected areas, and you can see from our education work and our community outreach work that we mostly deal with people. It's actually quite rare for us to see cheetahs in our day-to-day work, which is the great irony of it. I got into this industry because I love cheetahs and I never see them. But every now and then we get an amazing opportunity to make a direct difference and help a cheetah directly. So we give cheetahs second chances. So whether that they're injured, they've been injured by a snare, or they've been hit by a car, or they've been orphaned when their mother has been killed by a livestock farmer, we step in and help give those animals a second chance. So in this scenario, it was the middle of the drought. Botswana got hit very badly with the drought last year. It was sort of hit its peak. And when there's drought, we get peaks in human-wildlife conflict. And so within the space of a week, we had 8 cheetahs come into our care, and cheetahs that had been trapped by farmers, and the farmers had said, "You take these cats or we're going to shoot them." They had reached their limit. They had tried non-lethal techniques. Nothing had worked. And they had they couldn't handle it anymore. So we had 8 cheetahs on our hands. This is the cubs that belong to a beautiful female cheetah called Sididi. And then we had a coalition of newly independent adults, 2 males and a female. Bohali was the male that we ended up collaring. So we released all 8 of these cheetahs into a beautiful habitat that we managed to find in the Okavango Delta. Just within 2 kilometers of each other, we released the 2 coalitions. This is Bohali, and I believe that's his sister. Yeah. So we released them into the Okavango Delta. Beautiful habitat. There wasn't too many lions in the area, so it was a really great place for them to call home. Now, being much more intelligent, Sadidi, as a female, decided that, yes, this is a lovely habitat. I think I'm going to hang around. And so she raised her cubs there on the western side of the Okavango Delta. And that's her area in the black. That's where she called home after we released her. And she did incredibly well. She raised those cubs up until they were independent, and she still remains there to this day. So if you go and visit the Delta, be sure to stay at Pom Pom's camp. That's where she's hanging out these days. Now, Bohali and his brother, we assume that the female went off by her own soon after they were released. Those boys decided to go on a little bit of an adventure. This is where they roamed after we left them. Now, just to put this in a bit of context, this area here is the densest livestock population in Botswana. So when they left the Delta and headed into those areas, we were stressing out. We were really stressing out. We didn't think that there was any chance that they would survive moving back and forth across these areas. We thought for sure they were going to come into conflict, but they didn't, and they managed to survive. I think it was about 15 months that they were going back and forth. I mean, that area, that's about 200 miles difference there, and they were going back continuously. Anyway, after about 14 months, they found a lovely little spot down here on the Namibian side in an area called the Nai Conservancy, a wildlife area, a protected area, and we were so excited that finally these boys would be safe. Unfortunately, after a while, Bohali's collar stopped moving. And we overlaid the GPS points and the map that we had with Google Earth, and we saw that he had moved south out of the conservancy, the first time he'd ever done it. And there was the only cattle post within about 50 miles in any direction, the only place with livestock in the whole area. And then his collar stopped moving. So we drove there. It took us about 12 hours to drive there, across the border into Namibia, and we found the cattle post, we found the collar, we found his body in a hole, burnt. And I spoke to the farmer and I said, you know, what happened? And he said, no, he lost one goat, just one. Sorry. I mean, that didn't need to happen. It shouldn't have happened. One goat for one of the most endangered animals on the planet. It shouldn't have happened. So of all the area that they crossed, of all of the cattle posts and the livestock areas in Botswana that they traveled through, we know that people can coexist with these animals. We've spread our message of coexistence to these farmers. They know how to do it. It works. If they make a little bit of effort, they protect their livestock, they can coexist with these animals. But it only takes one farmer to end the life of a cheetah. So we need to get our message out to more people, more farmers. And we can do it. We're bettering the lives of these people, not just the cheetahs. And we can help create an ecosystem where we can all live together. And that's our goal. And that's what we've been able to achieve with the help of WCN, with the help of you guys. I mean, we get from WCN, we get over 50% of our annual running costs. So if it wasn't for the support of you guys, we wouldn't be able to achieve all this stuff that we've been able to achieve. So on behalf of myself, Rebecca, the whole team at CCB, all of the communities we work with, and all of these beautiful, beautiful cats, Ke'elibo hatata, thank you very much. You can do it.
Hello? Yes, all right, this is working, sorry. So yes, I don't think we've got really time for questions and answers, but Jane and I will be available at the end of the presentation, so please come and ask any questions that you may have about Botswana and cheetahs and coexistence, and we'll be at the stall afterwards as well. So I now want to introduce somebody that's very dear to my heart. I have known Olya for several years now, but previous to that, I've been great friends with her mum, Elena, who has been working for many, many years to conserve the incredible Saiga antelopes across their range, and particularly in Uzbekistan. And this is an animal, much like the cheetah, that's extremely wide-ranging. They live in the grasslands, they need huge areas to survive, so they require conservation land use planning on a really, really large scale. So we have a lot of similarities, and as I understand it, once upon a time, before the last ice age, cheetahs were existing in Central Asia, and they were actually chasing after the Saiga antelopes. So Elena has a wonderful daughter, Olya Esipova, who is following in her footsteps to become the next Saiga antelope conservationist. And this is really inspiring for me. I have a 4-year-old daughter at home, and one of my dreams is that she will grow up to take over cheetah conservation in Botswana, and I can have a little bit of time off. So, Olya, you're a great inspiration to me and many people, everyone who knows you and meets you. So we're really looking forward to hearing more about the conservation work that you're doing.
Wow. Thank you, Rebecca, for the great introduction and for the kind words. And good afternoon again. And so, yeah, thanks for coming and hanging around up till now. So, today we are going to talk about the world's oldest antelope, and my job is to make you fall in love with it. So I'll do my best. So the antelope I'm talking about is the Saiga, and I don't know, guys, how many of you are familiar with this animal? Quite a few. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I remember when we came here, like some years ago. My mom first of all, and then I joined as well. Almost no one knew about this animal, so I can see that, you know, the presentations are working. But yeah. But today, I will try to not only to tell you about this animal, but also answer some of the questions that some of you might have about why you should help the wildlife and how. So for now, look at this picture. So this is the Saiga, the baby Saiga, and that's how they look during the summertime. But that's the same animal, but it doesn't look quite the same, but still it's the same animal, and that's how they turned out to look during the winter. And partly the reason is because this animal has been around for quite a while, since the Ice Age, to be precise, and that's over 2.5 million of years, so that's quite impressive. And the reason why this animal survived for so long is a number of incredible adaptations that they have to survive. For example, their famous huge nose. So why they need this huge nose? 2 reasons. So if you remember the first picture, the baby Saiga during the summer. So they live in a very dusty environment in the steppe. And because of that, they need to filter the air, the dusty air that comes in. So nose help them when they run quick especially. But then during the winter time, it gets really cold. By really cold, I mean temperature like 58 degrees below zero, which is quite impressive. So they use their nose to heat up the air. And then they also run fast. They run fast with the speed of a car, about I think it's like 45 miles per hour, which is quite impressive. Last but not least, they have a very interesting birthing strategy. So when they calve, females usually gather in one place in the same time in winter during May, and they give birth at the same time, but also they give birth to 2 calves at a time every year, which is quite fast for quite a large animal like this. But this adaptation helped this very special animal to survive and bounce back despite all the odds. But today, I have to start on a sad note, giving the recent news that happened to this animal. Very sadly, we had another massive die-off that happened. Some of you might heard of this, the big one that happened a couple of years ago. Well, this year it repeated in another place. But as much as it is frustrating, I want to ask you to think critically about it, and let's try to find out the reason together. Because if we just, get upset and we are caught in this kind of negative emotions, we cannot really do anything about it, and all we want to see and do is just not to see those sad news again. But we have to, we have to think, and we have to find creative solutions how to solve this problem. So, I think many of you know Sherlock Holmes, the famous detective, who is a fictional character, but now there are so many movies around, so everyone should know it. So I would suggest that we use his methods of deduction to find out what kills Saigas. From the little pieces, we need to create a bigger puzzle, like the bigger picture, to find out what happens, what kills the Saigas. So let's treat it as a case study and try to find out together. So let's all imagine that we're in Mongolia, in the middle of a steppe, and Mongolia is located in the center. So there is Russia up and China down, so south and north. And Mongolia is one of four Saiga range states where Saigas inhabit these days. Someone is agree. Right. Okay. And so that's what happened this year. Very sadly, starting from December of 2016, actually. And up till now, we lost 5,000 Saigas, which is a half of the population that inhabits that area, that Mongolian part. And the worst thing about it is that this population is very unique because it's a different subspecies of the Saigas, meaning that you can find this subspecies of the Saiga only in Mongolia. If this population is gone, we don't have this subspecies anymore. And I mean, it's hard to tell the difference when you look at the Saigas because they look quite similar, this subspecies and all the rest of the Saigas. The only difference is maybe the horns are a bit darker, but they have different genetics, so that's why they're classified as a separate species. And yet, we lost over 50% of the species of the animals in this population, and that's a frustrating news for us. But the good part of it is that we know what happened. It was a disease that spread from the livestock, and it's called sheep and goats plague. So basically what happened, there was interactions between livestock and wild animals, including the Saigas. So that's how the disease spread. And there are ways how to stop it, how to prevent it actually. So if we vaccinate the livestock and if we stop this interaction between them, that can help. So that's reversible. And if you remember, I told you that they bounce back quite quickly because they have those adaptations that help them to survive. So there is a hope, I would say. And I got to tell you that, I mean, I got many people coming up to me and asking about the die-off, and so many people confuse this case and another one that happened 2 years ago in another country, in Kazakhstan. So, I mean, those are two separate cases, so let's get it straight now. So the one that happened this year is the viral disease, and it spread from the livestock, and it's not related to the one that happened in this country. And this is the neighboring country and the second Saiga range state, Kazakhstan. And so what happened there was truly puzzling, and even up till now, although we kind of know what happened, it's still a big mystery. So, to put it in a picture, that's what happened. And the scale is a lot larger. So if back then we talked about 5,000 Saigas, well, here we have over 200,000. so you see the difference. And if in that situation we lost those animals over the period of few months, well, here the animals drop dead overnight, just like that. So you can imagine, and this is just a little part of that. So, I mean, we tried to guess what happened. Not to guess, I mean, we tried to investigate, and like I said, like Sherlock Holmes, we started to look at the little details to find out what happened, because it was a big puzzle. That's a not normal thing to happen. Animals cannot die overnight in such large amounts in such a huge area. So we started looking at the environment and what can be the possible reason. So we thought about the toxins that can be found outside. Something like toxins that can be found in the soil, or maybe water, or grass, or vegetations, whatever. But we didn't find anything. That was confusing. It turned out that it wasn't toxins from the rocket fuel, because there was a serious well. And then we looked back at the history of the Saigas. There were other die-offs that happened before. It wasn't the first case, surely not, but not with the same kind of symptoms. So we were still puzzled. And we compared it to all the other cases that we could find in the history, and nothing was matching. We looked at the weather conditions, still no answer. And then the information went viral into the public, and people started making some explanations, guesses, and theories, and some of them believed that maybe those were aliens. I've seen quite a lot of comments and ideas that, yeah, that's the reason, but we decided to look further. And then some people suggested that maybe it was a sign of apocalypse, because as it turned out, during that night, the moon up there was full and unusually bloody, so that must be it, right? The full moon, the bloody moon, lots of animals are dead. Isn't it the reason? And yet, we decided to look for some more scientific proofs. So we decided to look farther for some evidence, etc. And, well, we found the reason, but it took us more than a year and a half, almost 2 years, actually. And as it turned out, it was a bacteria that lives in the bodies of the Saigas in their respiratory tract, quite harmlessly, actually. So it's a pastoral bacteria that lives inside the Saiga's body, normally almost any Saiga, but something turned it to become toxic. And that was the key confusion for us, because we couldn't find out what it was. And the sad part of it was that it affected females and newborn babies, because this tragedy happened in May, and May is the time of the calving season. So May is the time when Saigas give birth. And I mean, I've seen little Saigas, and I just, every time when I've seen that, I imagined the little babies, you know, like when you see them, they have those huge eyes and very soft noses, and then you imagine this animal dead, and you see pictures like that. I mean, that's horrible feeling. And yeah, so, but all we could do is to keep investigating what was the reason, and as it turned out, it was a combination of two factors. So, well, first of all, it has to do with the physiological stress that this animal has to undergo during the giving birth, like during the calving, because Saigas, as an animal, they are really prone to stress. And birthing is a very stressful event. So as it happens, and as they give birth, they have to go through a lot of stress. But also, at the same time, the weather conditions were not quite usual, so there was a little bit of difference. It was more rainy than it was before. So these two factors in combination, weather and physiological stress, those were two key things that turned the bacteria toxic. And as for the babies, well, they just drank infected milk from their mothers, and that's why they died as well. But at this point, you might think, well, it's also as bad, and it's not, because there are other things which are even worse, such as poaching. But you know what? Even with the die-offs, those are events that do not happen regularly, so that's not a typical threat for the Saiga. So it means it's not something that we should anticipate all the time, fortunately, but poaching is way more continuous, is way more serious threat in the sense that we have to face it all the time. And here, I mean, at this point you might also ask why people poach. And the reason is, like many other animals have to face it, is illegal trade that goes to countries that consume and use traditional Chinese medicine. So Saiga horns, they're used as a part of some medical, like there are more than 60 well-known drugs that cite Saiga horn as a component. So that's the reason of poaching, and that's way more serious threat. And now, looking at these shocking pictures, and by the way, I'm sorry for showing you so many negative things, but that's the reality, so I cannot just, show you nice pictures all the time. But still, you can ask, is there hope at all? And I should say yes, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here today. And, I mean, just have a look. Aren't they cute? I mean, you can't help but you want to protect this animal. So when we think about the hope and what can we do, even in the situations with the die-offs and poaching, well, the first thing that comes to mind is people. Because it's up to us. It's us people who have this power to either help an animal and the wildlife or destroy it. But we don't necessarily realize it all the time, how much power we have. And, well, I'm telling it to you because I have a background of a psychologist, so I'm not a biologist, and studying human behavior is my passion, and that's what I do for wildlife conservation, which is a slightly different angle, but I find it really helpful. So if you think about people, and it just keeps popping up, and I remember growing up, I realized that wildlife is more about people than it is about animals. Because, yeah, we are doing everything, I mean. And then the question arises, why should we care? So why should we bother to protect the wildlife? Why should we spend some time? Because usually, when we should do something to protect the animal, it means that we should spend some time volunteering. Because usually this work is not paid. It requires some time and commitment, which is a lot to ask, let's be honest. But if you think about it, volunteering improves the quality of your life. And I'm telling you this as a psychologist because there have been done tons of studies, tons of research about interaction with the wildlife, about helping some causes, some important causes that we can relate to. And what science has found is that it can increase your life satisfaction. There's a number of things, such as positive emotions that you get from volunteering, from helping the animals, from making the change. It improves your health, obviously, when you spend some time outdoors. And, well, it can even lead to better relationship. And by the way, this is one of the teachers that we work with. It's not a stock image. It's, well, she's from Russia, which is another Saiga range state, the southern part, which is called Kalmykia. And here we had our first ever wildlife academy for teachers. And I mean, you can see she was quite happy, like many other teachers that we had to interact with. But anyway, and I believe when we think about improving the quality of life, this is the main thing we should offer and ask from local communities and from people abroad, wherever, really, all kinds of communities. So when we do that, we should think about some key values that all of us have, such as equality, for example, because, and it can be anything. It can be related to gender equality. We have such a strong differences between men and female. Like females, usually women cannot, take active part in decision making, and that's what we try to change through our projects. Like we support women, for example, Saiga craft. They create these beautiful bags and they earn extra money so that they don't have to go, their husbands, I mean, don't have to go and poach the animal anymore. But it can be also equality in terms of using the wild lands, the resources, the nature resources, as for us and for future generations, because quite often we steal it from the future generations, and we should think about that. Come on. Yep. Another key value is the sense of competence. Because like, you know this feeling when you really want to be good at something that you're doing, and then you really feel satisfied when you go for it and you're doing something great and people are happy that you've done it. So that's what we support when we do our research projects. So we inspire people to do their projects, to make some difference for the wildlife through research and applied conservation, so that they actually feel that they're making the difference. And then it's also the sense of unity and social support that kids, but not only kids, also their parents, receive during our events, such as kids camps and Saiga Day, which is a big celebration for us and a big festival. And last but not least is the emotion. That's how you feel when you make a difference. That's all about the connection that you establish between yourself and the animal that you try to protect, the wildlife, the habitat, whatever it is. I just think we shouldn't forget that it's all about this emotion that we have when we do what we do to protect the wildlife. Because unless we have this emotional connection, we don't feel like we have to, protect this animal or we have to protect this habitat, because we are quite, egoistic creatures as human beings. But once we have this connection, we kind of feel the need and urge to support something else apart from us, which is a great thing. So on this final note, I just want you to remember that it is important to find something that brings the meaning to your life. And this something can be wildlife, and it should be, because it's guaranteed that your life will become better once you find this love in your heart for the wildlife and start doing something. So I want to challenge all of you today, go out there and find your favorite animal, come to the table, ask how you can help, ask how you can volunteer, ask how, I don't know, maybe make some donation, maybe offer some support, but do it because you have the privilege of having all those amazing conservationists here today just for you. And you can ask them face to face, you can ask about their challenges, you can talk to them. That's amazing, not everyone has it. So please remember it and try your best to help. Thank you.
I think we've got time for a couple questions for Olya. Does anybody have a question?
Any questions?
Now that you know the reason why those animals are dying, is there a way to avoid it?
Well, yes and no. If we're talking about the die-off that happened in Mongolia this year, then yes, obviously it's vaccination of domestic, like the livestock, and also separating it from wild animals. But in the case of the Kazakh die-off, that was something, something extraordinary. That's something that we cannot predict or prevent. But fortunately, this is not something that happens all the time. And this is not something that we should expect to happen often, because that's an event that is not going to happen quite often, like really, there's no way. So there are other things that we should focus on, like poaching, because this is the real threat. So this is something that we should be focusing on in order to bring this population back and give them a chance for a sustainable future.
Hi, are you providing, intensive education to user countries that Saiga horn has no medicinal value? Are you really educating them? Because I think that's a real problem.
Yes. Thanks for your question, and you're absolutely right. It's not enough to work with the habitat country, with the countries that have the Saigas and, you know, where people poach and sell the horn. It's not enough because locals people, yeah, that's important. But also there is another side, which is consumer country. And what we do, we have our newsletter that is translated into different languages, including Chinese, that we spread in consumer countries. So China is one of the largest ones, so we really target, and we have board members from China in our organization, so we really work through him. But I got to be honest, I wish we could have done more work, but it's really, it's work in progress, but we are going there.
One more question. Oh, two more questions. Okay. And
when a poacher is apprehended with horn, what kind of punishments are handed out?
Sorry, what kind of what?
Punishment.
Oh, what kind of punishment? So, first of all, killing Saigas is illegal in all Saiga range countries. It used to be a game species like 30 years ago, but not anymore. So, and there are different punishments in different countries depending on the law there. So we're talking about 4 countries: Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Mongolia. So I can speak about my country because I know it the best, which is Uzbekistan. So there, poachers, they're getting imprisoned, and depending on how much horns confiscated, and depending on what is the situation, like how the poacher was convicted, and who've seen it, etc. So this is the main things that predict how much time either the person is going to spend in jail, or maybe he can pay a fine and go out, but the fine is quite big. But the thing is, I believe that we should work more on working with the countries that we border with, because there is another thing. The illegal trade, it starts in Uzbekistan or in Kazakhstan, for example, and then it goes to other countries. So we are talking about a legal criminal chain that involves different countries. So we really need this collaboration between the countries, which is hard to achieve, but possible. So this is something that we should work on, to have this common legislation that would allow us to make this punishment severe enough for people not to do it again and again.
I completely agree that working on the poaching is way better than the other reason, just because it's something you can predict, you know, something you can really stop. But you said the massive die-off that happened because of mostly like weather conditions and stress.
Yes.
So would climate change have like a big impact on those reasons, would you say?
Yes, I would say, of course, climate change impacts Saigas like many other animals, like probably all the animals and us as well. So what happens, but in this situation, okay, there are 2 factors, direct and indirect factors. So if I'm talking again about my country, there was another thing that happened, which I didn't touch because I didn't have much time, but I'll explain briefly. So we also used to have a big sea, which was called Aral Sea, that was on the territory between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. It was the 4th largest lake in the world until it shrinked not long ago. So you can imagine, once you lose this kind of watering place on the territory, the climate changes very drastically. So it's not just the global climate change that we are talking about here, but we are also talking about this local change in the climate, which was quite, like, way stronger than the global one. So these 2 factors, so of course, first of all, it's a different weather. It became way more dry, so the habitat of the Saiga shifted a little bit. Their migratory routes also shifted because of that. But another thing is, people that lived nearby the sea, they were fishermen mostly, right? So that was the main source of income for them. But once the sea has shrinked, they didn't have a job anymore. So all of them were left jobless. And during this time, it was the time of collapse of Soviet Union. So it was a very messy, crazy time. So lots of people were left without jobs, partly because of the climate change, partly because the sea shrinked. And so that's another reason that actually pushed poaching. So people started poaching because they didn't have job. So this is indirect impact. So you can say that climate change not only impacts like animals in general in terms of their habitat, but also it impacts people. And in this case, we are also talking about poaching. So it's all related. It's a complex issue.
Let's have one more round of applause for Olya and also for Rebecca and
Thank
Jane.
you. Thanks for coming and stay until the end.